So maybe I can put like, I don't know whether you can.
I think it's all right. As long as they can hear us, I think.
Can you all hear us fine?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah, so we are a couple of us here in New York at the Google office, just chilling out.
How's the guest Wi-Fi there?
Yeah. Yeah, we have Michael here, Pav, Bob up here with us. Say hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it just these servers?
Just wait a couple of minutes for people to join.
All right, I guess we could probably get started here. Sorry, I'm usually at home, so that's usually when this comes up. But yeah. 1 second here.
Do you want like?
I'll just go look at Okay, yeah, it looks like we got folks on. Okay, so just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and your participation should abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So just a follow-up from the last couple of meetings. We've been mostly been talking through the proposals now that the CNCF, the Secure Software Factory Reference Architecture document is now out and released. We're mostly just looking at new bodies of work to kind of work on and so on. So before kind of getting back into the proposals, wanted to kind of just ask the group if there's any sort of like big updates or anything interesting that's come up in the supply chain space from your end.
Right, I guess not.
All right, okay. If not, yeah, we can get started here.
I can bring it up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different proposals. One for the SBOMs, one for looking at, can we look at a CNCF project and have it just apply the best practices, reference architecture, whatever, to it. There was also a few other ones as well. Bring it up now.
Oops. What was it called? Best practices. There we go. So I guess we can chat about this one first.
Sure.
Then,
Yeah, I can give a little bit of the background again for anybody who isn't familiar. So the point of this particular proposal was just to kind of evaluate if there's CNCF projects that we can start applying those best practices to, and collaborate with the other sorts of things that are going on, like Salsa and whatever, to sort of say, hey, we help secure the supply chain for some of these projects. So there's a couple of different ones we've been talking to. So one of the ones was a CERT manager, which is doing a little bit of Salsa stuff today, but there's obviously some challenges there that they're running into to kind of hit a lot of the supply chain security best practices. But hey, is there areas we can help there? Also, apparently, Emily and Adolfo, who Adolfo is one of the folks on SIG release for Kubernetes. We're having a chat about, hey, how's Kubernetes' supply chain security stuff coming along? And one of the things that was brought up there was they are looking at potentially securing the parent images for Kubernetes itself. So the images that build Kubernetes, I should say, the build images for Kubernetes, and how can we, how can they secure that? And so there's some work on that end, and I think that they are looking, at least in the short term, for some feedback on their supply chain roadmap. And if there's things that we think that it doesn't seem to align with best practices, or if there's some stuff that maybe they've missed, and potentially areas we might be able to help out, as well as as time goes on, potentially more areas for collaboration there.
I think I want to add on to this as well. I know that it's kind of a little bit of a little bit of a tangent from the original proposal.
Yep.
So I want to make it clear that this is something that we probably have to sit down with the SIG release folks and figure out what's their plan, what's their roadmap looking like, and we also taking a huge project like Kubernetes is a big undertaking as well.
Yep.
So I think the current we're looking to kind of sit down just a couple of folks to figure out what their roadmap looks like, and I think that potentially just logistically wise, what may happen is like we may split that into its own issue and kind of put it on our roadmap as well, like a couple quarters down.
Yeah, and just to be clear, because maybe it wasn't clear from this initial sort of proposal, was not to sort of dedicate any major effort to this. It was like, hey, is there any low-hanging fruit, some simple things? For example, looking at, are there simple things that we can just kind of, so it's probably just like a simple thing, but yeah, anything that's kind of, I would say more than a couple of weeks worth of work, I would want it to be its own sort of thing that gets discussed.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like to create work for others that benefits themselves, right? So all we're proposing here is rubber stamping other projects.
No, that's not the case here. I think the idea here is to work with those other projects to see. One is it could just be providing guidance, hey, here's what we're currently doing. Does this make sense? Working with them to sort of say, no, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. And kind of going from there. With that said, personally, I'm willing to sort of provide some engineering effort, right? I still have stuff to do day to day, but if there are certain sort of easy wins of yeah, I can help you out with, fixing up your build script or whatever. I think I'm at least down for that. Would want to sort of also make sure that other folks would be willing to sort of dedicate that same sort of time as well.
I think the way I think about it is kind of like the security pulse effort, right? Where it's kind of we'll have someone to try and provide some guidance, but we're not really saying anything about the project.
One thing that concerns me about this approach is, right, we don't know what the level of buy-in from the project is. I want to see them commit resources as well, and then maybe we come in more of an advisory role. And yeah, we can definitely write scripting, give them some, do some technical work, right? We all enjoy that. But really, for this to be successful, the individual projects need to take ownership of it. If they do not, what's going to happen is that SIG Security, Supply Chain Working Group, is going to end up being responsible for securing all of CNCF. And that's just, we just can't maintain that, right? At least with our current architecture. Maybe in the future, we'll come up with something crazy where we can do that. But right now, I think we really need to get the project maintainers to buy in and commit resources to this effort. And if they do that, I think, I have no problem personally taking, an hour a week to spend time with the project maintainer and say, hey, this is the first thing you need to do in order to implement SALSA level 3 in your project. All right, so go do that. Let's meet back in a week and see what your progress is on that, right? It's kind of like that advisory consulting role.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's kind of where we've been currently pushing. So for example, like Cert Manager, they're already doing certain things with their SALSA story, and they're kind of like, is this correct? We're not sure based on, obviously, are we following the right practices, and kind of saying like, hey, let's take a look, and then helping out there, and then saying, yeah, like, because this is one of the things I totally agree with you on, is like, we want to make sure whatever projects we work with are dedicated to fix. They're coming to, they're saying, hey, we want to fix our supply chain security here, and then let's have that discussion. And to your point, yeah, like, we want to more help them get there than necessarily do it for them. I think that's critical here, and that's also why, for example, I don't want to take on, for example, Kubernetes supply chain security. However, there's like, there is this small piece of their build that they're like, hey, there might be an easy win here. Does it make sense for us to maybe, chat through what that means? And once again, like, this is stuff that they are already planning to do. It's more of us just coming in and saying, with our expertise, and saying like, oh, hey, while you're doing that, let's collaborate here to make sure that you're doing it correctly.
Yeah, like if you scan across the board of CNCF projects and their issue boards, you're gonna find many different asks that resemble this from different entities, different individuals. Take Fossing, for example. Many of the people who work at Fossing projects come to CNCF projects and say, hey, we see you have not foster code. Like, we'll help you set this up. And like, maintainers typically are not going to engage with that. Why? Like, they don't want to get worked up and like excited with like someone coming doing something that equates to a sales pitch or a demo, then do like some sort of POC, get them worked up, and then like step away and leaving the maintainers with extra work for something that one hasn't like reached their pain threshold, is not like a top priority for them. Most of them are just treading water, like maintaining and growing the project as it is. So if we're gonna make any, like, I think at least my vision, this is like a great opportunity to build a volunteer security apparatus across the CNCF. Much like SIG release is like a volunteer like release engineering team. Like, if Puerco doesn't do his stuff, or like Puerco gets distracted, like Kubernetes doesn't get shipped, right? He has like knowledge that other people in SIG release don't have, much like I was talking to Ash and Emily yesterday. If the person that knows everything about the build pipeline of Open Policy Agent were to move on in the project or get distracted with something else, it's not that any of the maintainers can like balance that load out. So I think we should have some more formality on like, more than, oh, we're gonna go like look over things and like give you some advice and like give you some recommendations of like, they know what the best practices are. All of these maintainers are like professional engineers. If they're not doing something today, there's like a conscious trade-off of like,
I think I hear what you're saying, and I think that's something we have to solidify, right? I think like a good next step would be to say, here's what we're expecting of a project. We are gonna say, you need to dedicate X number of hours, and here are some things that we need people with certain expertise on, And so like we are kind of like self-selecting projects that really want to do it, right? I think just solidifying that and saying, this is what we're going to provide and this is what you have to provide, and just doing it that way, right? I think that's only so much you can do, right? And, like shit happens with people sometimes, like people get medical emergencies, you can't predict all that. So I think the best you can do is like, here's what we're asking for, and like if you think you fit the bill,
Yeah.
say that you want to commit to it.
I mean, we say it's the nature of open source and it's the best we can do, but like all of us, the majority of us, we're like for either very well funded startups or like Fortune 100 companies, right? None of our employers would do business that way, right? No one would go on the hook to put something in production. We're talking about software that powers most of
I
our
don't think
Let me
that's I
finish.
think that's
Hold on.
true.
I want to finish that. So what I'm proposing is if we have a pool of people here that are going to carry out this work, rather than say, oh, it's gonna be a few of us have an informal chat with the SIG release team, is like, no, we have a couple of people or like X number of people that we know have studied and learned this stuff that can like credibly and authority implement it. Let's put them on rotation, and we're gonna say, hey, Kubernetes, we're gonna avail them not just for like a couple of chats. Like these people are gonna be available for you for like 6 months, 9 months, a year, like a pal, and they're gonna ramp up the learning curve of everything there is to know for SIG release and everything there is to know of like Secure Software Factory, and they're gonna be like, if we're going to avail an SRE, like we're going to avail like a volunteer, security engineer, and maybe a couple people to have like some failover and availability.
I don't think that's what the proposal is about, though.
I mean,
I
I'm
don't
saying that the proposal has its shortcomings, and that's why I have concerns.
No, I think that's fair, right? And I think like based on what people on the call, like Cole mentioned, right? We are willing to say like, I'll sit down with you 1 hour to kind of like a week to be like, okay, here's what you have to do. But I don't think any of us are saying that we're going to be a dedicated SRE to a particular project. And I think like that in itself has value. And I don't think it is, I don't want to distract away too much from this particular proposal. Like, I
Okay.
think that has value. We can create another proposal just about that, right? And maybe that has a slightly different trajectory, where maybe like CNCF should have a program where, they can hire security professionals. They go through kind of like our training, and then they become SREs for CNCF projects.
And it is being discussed, and it's something that's been like Greenlight Ask Emily, Jim Semlin lit up like as of last week. But what we also want to talk about here is like an opportunity for people to grow and develop themselves, is like parallel path to maintainers and be like security engineers for the projects, like a more solid, well-rounded security pal specialized in supply chain security. But if we want to say like, oh, this is out of the scope of the issue, let's don't do the right thing. Let's just talk about like what we want to do, like hang out a couple meetings with these folks and say, oh yeah, this sort of resembles the principles and concepts of our paper. Sure, you may be running like your stuff on GCP and like the stuff that CNCF does, but like the differential is really big. The delta.
You're conflating two different things. The talk with SIG Security has nothing to do with this proposal. Okay. The talk with SIG Security is Kubernetes SIG release, not SIG Security. The talk with SIG release is to discuss whether there's opportunity to collaborate in the future, or whether this meets the scope of some of the work that we want to do here, right? I think the conversation is around whether it's relevant or not. I don't think it's clear that it is definitely relevant to this particular proposal. So I want to.
It's written on the issue you say it has nothing to do, but says note discussing possible collaboration with Kubernetes at release. So it's
But it is not the core. Like if I want to say I want to do a piece of work, if there's a group that's relevant to this, maybe I can apply that to work. But we haven't even gotten to the point to discuss like what exactly are we doing, right? What are we doing? Like what do we want to do with projects? And I think that's like, oh, do you want to have some engineering effort? How many hours are we willing to put in? How many people do we have? Like I'm more concerned about like staffing it and interest of the group first before we go on to solidly say like, oh, let's do this for Kubernetes.
I mean, it's what we're trying to talk about. We said
Yeah.
it hasn't been discussed, but
Yeah.
so let me pause here. I don't want to hijack the call, and like we should probably time box this here.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of finish this up. Yeah, like a lot of this just came out of, hey, there were some discussions that were happening at KubeCon. Emily brought up, hey, I talked to SIG Release. There seemed to be potentially some areas that might collaborate, might be related here, and maybe you should have a chat with them about that and just see if, hey, that's an area we can kind of explore. I'm actually probably leaning towards no, at least in the short term, outside of maybe a couple of quick like, hey, yeah, we'll look over your stuff and look over your current roadmap and just maybe provide a couple of thoughts, but that's it. Like,
I don't think it's that helpful for us to like dive too deep into this because we're just hypothesizing about shit.
yeah.
I do want to say, because I want to get to the other proposal as well. I want to say for this particular proposal that it needs a little bit more meat in terms of like what exactly, like in terms of like actual execution, what are we?
Yeah, I mean, I think on that end, it's definitely, I definitely agree with Andres here. Like, I think we want to make sure, what are we as a team willing to work on, and then we kind of we use that as the baseline, and then we kind of go from there and see what projects are actually then willing to work within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be crisp on that. Sorry, someone wants to speak up, but I just want to say, like, the two things I find problematic on the language here are like, well, apply best practices as well as highlight any challenges or gaps that would prevent. Okay, that's the scope work. But the other part is like, there's a lot of like sorry, I'm a little bit like deer on headlights looking at my screen, but if we were to apply this, blah blah blah, there's like a lot of we's like, we're talking about doing work, we're not talking about doing work, we're talking about doing scoping. So yeah, I'll pause there. Someone else wanted to speak up. I think it was called.
Yeah, I think what's missing from this, as far as like the meat, is just like, okay, what's the carrot? What do these projects get? What do they get if they reach SALSA level 3? Well, I think what it is that the external organizations that use, for example, Cert Manager, lots of them, right? They want to know that the software is secure, and having some sort of a CNCF badge that's saying, hey, this has been through our, we certify that this is SALSA level 3, right? Because the TAG security working group went through it and worked with the team to get to that level. And maybe we have some way to sign that using some sort of a CNCF credential saying that, hey, this release is signed off by us, a build pipeline is signed by us. I mean, that's kind of what SALSA is about, right? Is certifying those build pipelines. So if we offer that certification to these open source projects, I think it's going to give them a lot more motivation to work towards these goals, right? Because that will give organizations the assurance they need to consume their open source project.
True. Just being really crisp on the value prop, right?
Yeah.
Trying to help to them.
Yeah, tighten that up, tighten the value prop up for the open source projects and tie that to the needs of industry. And I think if we can do that within this proposal, it'll be a winner. And exactly how we execute that is going to depend on the resources available to us, right? It'd be great if we have a dedicated security team that can just be with these projects all the time. I don't know if that's going to happen, right? That's beyond my purview, right? That's going to be up to the CNCF. But what we can do is offer some time and advice right now. And that's something we can do today. to help these organizations get there. And then we can work towards maybe a certification program that gives them that carrot and gives external organizations the clarity that they need about these projects.
And we're competing for their bandwidth, right? Like, go find a CNCF incubated or graduated project where the maintainers will tell you, oh no, we have great work-life balance. We're just chilling. We want to see what else we should be working on.
Yeah.
No, they're all suffering from being short-staffed, having too much crap, keeping the lights.
I guess, like, I mean, so to be clear, I think I agree here is, but I think the question is just like do we just where do we want to move as a group? Like, just at like this particular working group, like what do we want to work on? Like, it's okay to say like, hey, look, this is maybe not something that is actionable, or it's just not going to work due to like the CNCF projects maybe not having enough time or whatever. Which is okay. I think we might just want to reevaluate then what the goal of this group is going to be. Like, if it's not applying the work that we've done already, like the reference architecture and the best practices, like, is it something else? Yeah. Hey, I'm open to that.
I mean, anecdotally on Spiffy, it took us like close to 9 months to migrate from like Travis to Circle CI about 18 months ago. And it's not that we didn't want it to, like we had like burning pains and sharp edges, and people kept pushing us because like people weren't able to build on their Macs, like people were like running into all sorts of constraints, and like we like even like the person who was like in charge to do that migration ended up like consuming the rest of the other 4 maintainers' help for like a really like large period of time. So all these things introduce change, and like there are trade-offs to make, and just like being really mindful of that is something we need to develop.
So I think to that, Cole mentions some actionable items that we can work on, right? So let's figure out how we want to do it and what are some incentives that we can create for this, right? I would ask Cole, but he's already dropped off the call. I guess we can ping him after this, but I think incentives and also like what are small things that we think are well scoped ideas that we can potentially, I think it's helpful to potentially have a list of things to be like, oh, here's what you could do, and here's the amount of effort you could do to get them, and then just let the projects be like, oh yeah, this looks like something that's important to me, and I want to work on that. So I would say the action item for here is to add comments in the issue to what you think may be good incentives for projects. And I think there were a lot of points you brought up during the call, like certification, things like that. And also like, what are small wins or small tasks that, projects we could engage with the project, right? I think having it a little bit too open-ended kind of doesn't.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think when I originally was sort of writing up the proposal, it was actually kind of with that sort of vagueness there, just kind of saying, hey, look, I want to throw a couple of things out there and then see what folks kind of think. And I agree that like, yeah, this would need to be tightened up, but also at the same time, yeah, like to Andres's point, I think some of the stuff that I was trying to do was actually kind of saying like, if we reach out to some projects and say, what is your appetite for starting to apply these rules? If they say, yeah, I can dedicate, a couple hours one week, and that's their entire dedication. Okay, let's take a step back. Maybe this is not going to work. If the idea here is
they say, yeah, here's a very specific thing, and we are like in the middle of doing it, and we just actually don't have the expertise, and we could just use some help, it's going to be a very different sort of thing. And so maybe rewording that, it's almost like a proposal for a proposal, like it's a, hey, I'm proposing that we do some research to see what CNCF projects are willing to start securing their supply chain, and at what effort, what effort level are they willing to do it?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, none of these projects really want to dedicate any time, then we probably need to take a step back and say, okay, great. What can we do to make this seem more important? Like what can we do to help educate? Or maybe we're off base here, and no, supply chain security isn't important.
So I think there's a concrete action item here then, because we did this for the same with the white paper. I think we should do a survey of
Sure.
CNCF projects and design a survey to answer exactly your questions, right? Like, have you read this paper, like best practices paper? Is it important to you? Are you working on some of these things, and how much time you want to spend on working with it?
A good avenue for that might be the maintainer circle that Paris Pittman and other folks host on a regular basis. We can go present there, and like you're going to be reaching like a really good audience of not all maintainers join it, but there's like good representation. Might also be a good place to circulate the survey. Last thing is, we talked a lot about the projects. I'd encourage you not to ignore all the people who've chimed in saying, I want to be involved. How can I help? Like, this is not the Michael and Brandon project, right? Like, there's a lot of people like willing to dedicate time. They're just looking for like structure, guidance, being told what to do. I presume all these people are doing it because they want to apply something they already know, or they want to develop these skills. So we do have a lot of human power here we could leverage that we're not contemplating. I met Matt Smith in Valencia 2 weeks ago, and he seemed super eager about like, hey, how do we improve? He asked Amy and Jeff in their session, like, hey, how's the CNCF doing these things? Like, how much is people from the CNCF? How much is volunteers? How can volunteers do more? Matt, you want to speak a little bit to that? Like, good to see you again.
I mean, yeah, nice to see you too. Yeah, I mean, like you summed that up pretty well. Like, there are. I mean, I am one example of, I'm guessing, so people who want to do some like more contribution, not just on like the CNCF level of like just trying to support projects, but actually just physically contributing things. So there's all sorts of things that can be done from like contributors and people who are just interested beyond just like the
and it gives you something. Advice. It gives you something to show up to a project and say, hey, here's my issue and PR for this thing. I'm not just like asking for attention with an issue, telling you should solve this obvious thing. Is like, I actually like have assessed like your build system, and I've seen these deficiencies, and maybe there are some ways to improve it here. So it's like, okay, this person is like willing to pitch in. It's not just like pointing at an obvious problem with like providing a solution.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I just kind of want to counter the, like, we are having these discussions in these meetings. We're having these discussions in these Slacks. And if this comes off as the, oh, this is the mic show or whatever, that is definitely not the intention. And if I'm not being open enough to, folks, hey, I hear that feedback, and I'll, do better to try and, do that. But I want to make it clear that this is not intended to be, oh, this is my baby or anything like that. Yeah.
I will drop this baby in a second if I can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have enough things going on.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to drop.
Yeah, there's a level of personal responsibility that comes from like contributors and things to be involved and like be active on that. And that is, for example, something that I have yet to do because I'm just kind of like building my way into doing contributions to CNCF and other projects and stuff. So yeah, there's a a balance between driving the proposal and like running the show as it's your baby.
Yeah. So I think this is a good juncture to be like, now we have some ideas that we kind of talked about in the group, right? I kind of added the discussions on potential action items we can take. And I think this would be a good time to open it up to folks, Matt or anyone else, like Alan, Eric, or the usual folks. If this is something that you think is interesting to do, I think we can start adding to some of that, right? And we are at the stage of proposals where we will be determining, who's going to lead this project. And so, this is a good opportunity to kind of start brainstorming. And if you develop a direction, and some like initial POCs that the group is happy to corral behind, then, this is a good leadership opportunity. Yeah.
Cool.
And I would say, like, if anything, like, feel free to like ping myself, Andreas, Michael, or any other folks on the call to kind of like get started.
Yeah, and there's also the Slack. We have a lot of the conversations there in the Slack.
Yeah. So we have action items, which is good. That means stuff can be done.
I think the first step is the survey piece, right? Which are the which projects are interested in this and that they want to do this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think if we know that, then we can start road mapping. These are the types of, this is the work that needs to be done or whatever, like, is there an initial assessment that needs to be done, and then, all that kind of stuff based on their engagement and activity. So
do we have any takers to kind of maybe create a initial draft or kind of outline for the survey?
I can take a stab at it.
Okay.
Nobody else.
And Matt, are you interested as well?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I would be, but I also realized that I am incredibly busy for the next like week and a half. So there will be limits to how much I can actually contribute on that. But we can chat in the Slack and I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Path creates something, and then like a couple of weeks later, once you have additional cycles, we can, sync back
Sweet.
up on it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And maybe it's not like a super detailed questionnaire, but we can keep it at 5 questions.
Yeah, a quick thing. If it's too many questions, then nobody's going to do it.
Maybe Matt and Parth can go talk to Maintainer Circle. You'll be the envoy, the delegate.
Can you link us that meeting or something in Slack?
Yeah, that'd be
for-
good.
Yeah.
Just so we can find it easily.
Yeah, Brandon Mitchell just mentioned time check. I think the S1 proposal posted that he's kind of still fleshing it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we'll discuss that maybe next week or the week after.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the other proposal that we had?
I think those were the two. Oh, and then Sripad's.
Sripad's?
Yes.
I think we had a conclusion for that one, which seems better fitted for OpenSSF.
Oh, really?
Oh, except for if there was a particular, I think, open CNCF. Yeah, I think that might be right.
Yeah, because I remember having this conversation with him, and he said he will go present it at OpenSSF.
Oh, that's right.
But let me just check. This one, right? Yep. Yeah. So Shripad, I'll just ping him here. Updates on this. If not, I think we've pretty productive. We have some direction with the survey. Yeah. Any thoughts? If not, we can share a little bit about what we've been doing here over the past 2 days. Do you want to talk to it? You want me to talk to it?
That's your workshop. Yeah. Why
Okay.
don't you talk to it?
So Santiago isn't here. He had a couple of meetings in the morning. Actually, let me see whether he's. Oh, shit. Santiago's downstairs.
Sitting outside for an hour or something.
Wait.
If worst comes to worst, I can take it while you get.
I'll do. Wait. I'll ask him give me 10 minutes, and then I will. I'll just do an intro, and then he can. Oh, Bob's here. Yeah, pick up Santiago.
Yeah, I can.
You can? Yeah, he's on there.
Okay.
Okay. He is at the. I want to make sure you get the right entrance. I don't know whether he's at the 9th Avenue entrance or not. Do you have his? Take his number. All right.
Don't
Alright,
care
sorry.
what is it that you're up to. I got sidetracked, but I just heard a bunch of names, but never seen.
Okay, so we this was back. I think this was in February or something like that. I went to Purdue, to be part of a panel, part of one of the events there, and so I caught up with Santiago, and we kind of chatted, and we had kind of similar ideas about like, okay, let's take all this like data that we have from Salsa SBOM, and kind of like put it in a knowledge graph or some graph that we can query and like figure out cool things about. And then so we had the discussion, and then we're like, okay, this is cool. Let's maybe work on it at some point when we're free. And then I got back. I had a chat with Michael, and then he showed me his cool SCQ tool, which basically puts in total attestations into a graph, and then basically visualizing it. And I think he's shown this work in this group last week that I missed. So we ended up getting together weekly to kind of think about, what are certain things we can do, what do we want to get out of this. And so we decided to do an in-person workshop to kind of talk about how can we construct this graph, what are kind of the questions that we would ask of this graph, and how we ended like the different use cases. And so like and like there's a lot of considerations, right? Like for example, if you have multiple SBOMs, like how do I know which one I should use? How should I aggregate the data, right? Should I pick one over the other based on who I trust more? Do I take this information and aggregate it? So we are kind of within the discussions. We kind of got to a point where we think that everything should be like in total attestation, at least intermediate representation of it. It gets put into the graph. Artifacts, identities, and attestations are kind of like the three main graph node types, and you should only be able to query positive predicates about things, right? So like vulnerability information isn't going to be in the graph, but certification of vulnerability scans for particular software would be in the graph. But yeah, so we talked about use cases yesterday. Let me see what I can share. Share my screen.
What's the elevator pitch? I'm still lost.
So the pitch is just, hey, we have all these attestations, we have all these SBOMs, we're doing all this great, we have all this great metadata. How do we use it? How do we go in and say, okay, well, I have an SBOM for my tool, and let me go pull the SBOM for my dependencies, and let me, recursively do that, and then start to ask questions about my supply chain, right? Look at the VEX to see where, where there could be vulnerabilities now as opposed to yesterday, like things like that. How do we start answering some of those questions?
From a metadata store standpoint, or from like verification at runtime?
It's a little of across the board. It's from the perspective right now of, okay, so we're generating these attestations, and you know, a lot of it's being stored in stuff like transparency logs, like Recore, or in repos like OCI or alongside the package. And then how do you then take that and then ingest it such that you can also ask the questions of, you know, at runtime, like a binary authorization style question, or from an audit perspective, you know, there's a what Brendan has up right now is a bunch of the you know, sort of use cases.
Yeah, so you know, kind of we're looking at like what are the documents that we have out there, right? The SALSA, the attestations, the vulnerability documents, and then we talked about, you know, what people are looking for. You know, I want to make sure that the software that I ingest in is not bad, doesn't have any malware, it's not compromised. I'll make sure that everything that I create within my organization meets the build standards and like software writing SSDF standards, right? And then when I deploy things, I want to make sure it has correct sign-offs, it has correct scans and things like that. Obviously, we have like the log4j question, like what happened. We also have the question of like, if I find out that maybe Travis CI was like compromised within like the past month, right? They just realized it was compromised, and you know, which of the artifacts within all the software that I've created is affected by this. Hey, Santiago.
Hello.
Say hi.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and then from the research perspective, like how can we analyze this to kind of like figure out what are some of the like critical nodes within the software supply chain, or like maybe we can figure out how to simplify the software supply chain. And then we have this nice picture, which doesn't have that much doesn't make that much sense out of context, but yeah, we've been discussing like what are the components, what does the graph look like, and stuff like that, which is the same exact thing. Yeah, but you know, all this is unprocessed information, so it's a bit scatterbrained. But yeah, that's what we've been talking about. Yeah, anything else?
No, I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
Police is looking for you.
I know. We solve supply chain security, and it's gotta. All right. I guess any other thoughts? If not, we can end early.
Man,
On that.
that just like made my mind blank. There was other stuff I wanted to talk about before, but I don't know. Brandon Mitchell wants to talk about things, I'm sure.
I think all the things I was wanting to talk about was SBOM stuff that we'll push off to next week.
Yeah, we will push that next week.
So reconvening at this cadence for the foreseeable future, weekly Thursdays, 11 a.m. East Coast time.
Yep. Matt, do you want to say something? I saw your mic off.
Just on that last one of like doing the research and like creating all of that, like what's the end goal? What's the outcome of that? Is it just like essentially the research of like, this is the sort of thing that we're looking for, or are we looking to actually putting forward a white paper for this is the sort of tool that we'd like to see? What's the outcome that we're looking for?
So I'm gonna defer to our professor here on what the research.
Hello. So for research in particular, I think there's like a couple of layers, right? The first one would be, do we have the tools that we can use to start asking research questions around like an ecosystem analysis and like security metrics? I just actually was reading this morning an ICSI paper that was analyzing the ecosystem of like NPM around like vulnerability management and like dependency tracking. So I think at that level, just being able to build infrastructure so that we can start asking research questions is important. The other like immediate things that I would love to start asking and of course answering is how can we evolve the ecosystem rather than just understanding like the graph structure of the software ecosystem? Can we actually try to incentivize and come up with like a the word just left my head, intervention, sorry, so that we can build a stronger ecosystem, be it as as consumers, like just by dependency management, or even more aggressive, can we actually fund or select a path to say move a critical node in the graph to the standard library of a programming language so that it's maintained by a like more trusted /core group of people. In the longer term, like after those sort of interventions, I think that we can even start asking questions around monetizing delivery networks, or like even rethinking like management questions around how to make open source sustainable at the like financial level. But I think, yeah, like to me, the important thing is, can we actually have trustworthy data about the ecosystem so that we can start doing research and like mining the hell out of that graph.
Okay. Cool.
I like do blockchain. I was gonna lose it.
Put a blockchain somewhere in there.
All right. Yeah, that answers my question. All good.
Awesome.
Let's finish.
How well does this time slot work across the pond? Like, would you see benefit in like having a second call like for EMEA based folks?
I mean, for me, this is fine because I literally finished work and then 10 minutes later I'm on this call.
Yeah.
So it like most of the CNCF like meetings and like SIG release meetings that are on like what is it, like Pacific time on West Coast time line up pretty much exactly with when I finish work for like going on for about 2 hours, and then I'll go and like make food and go for a run and shit. So at least for me, it works great.
Cool. Glad to hear.
All right.
Awesome.
Cool. Hopefully I'll get to actually do some shit on like contributing to the issues and things, but we'll see, because I'm gonna go get drunk on Friday for the summer party.
Don't
like
forget to go on the run before that.
Pardon?
Today. Don't forget to go on the run before that. Or today.
Yeah, that's the plan after this. Go get some food and go for a run. I'll do that now.
All right.